Shalom Israel, and welcome to another edition of Yashar Allah Library. Today what we're going to deal with is two books. One book is called The Rise of Russia, and the second book we're going to deal with is a book called The Annunciation Cathedral of the Moscow Kremlin. Now, if you've been in Israel for a while, and you've watched videos of brothers going out to camp and teaching, a lot of times brothers have to teach the most elementary things in the scriptures to actually get our people's attention. Our people for the longest have been taught that the Bible is a white man's book. When they think about Christ and all the apostles and the prophets and the kings of Israel and the people of the Bible in general, the first thing that pops into the majority of our people's mind is those Renaissance images that they've seen their whole lives, such as the white image of Christ painted by Michelangelo. So if you watch these camp videos, you'll notice that a lot of times brothers, in order to prove that Yahushua, Jesus Christ, was a black man, they'll do two things. They'll either reference a picture that a talented brother in Israel might have drawn depicting the description of Yahushua that we find in the book of Revelations, the 1st chapter and the 14th verse, while other camps will reference the Russian icons. They'll actually download images from Google or other sites and put them out, on a board so that people can see that we knew even back 500 years ago that the apostles of the Bible, the prophets, the kings, so forth and so on, were black. But have you ever wondered why it is that all the icons in Russia that you see are black? Have you ever wondered why? Well, the answer to that question is very simple. The reason why the icons of Russia are black is because black people were ruling Russia during the time that these icons were painted. If you were to go to Russia, some of the main sites in Russia that you would go to would be the cathedrals. The cathedrals are some of the main prime tourist attractions in Russia, as well as the museums. And when you go into these different cathedrals, you'll notice that most of the icons on the wall are black. Now, we'll be particularly dealing with two cathedrals, two very famous cathedrals in Russia. One is called the Cathedral of the Annunciation, and the other cathedral is called the Cathedral of St. Basil. Now, I'm showing you on your screen a picture of St. Basil the Great, also known as Basil the Fool. And you can clearly see he has an afro, he has a long beard, and he's dark-skinned. Well, there's a cathedral in Russia that was built in commemoration of this black man, this Israelite man, this brown-skinned man. It was built in his commemoration, and it was built by a black Russian czar. Now, why is that important? The reason why that is important is because at the same time that the Cathedral of St. Basil and the Cathedral of Annunciation were being built in Russia, which is Western Europe going into Asia, Eastern Europe going into Asia, what did you have going on in Western Europe at that same time? At that same time, you had the Renaissance going on in Western Europe, where all the iconoclasm or the destruction of the black art was taking place. So while that was taking place, these Russian czars were building cathedrals in Russia and painting black icons at the very same time. Now, why did that happen? The Most High is behind that. So before we actually get into these two books, I just want to read two quick scriptures to you. The first scripture I want to go to is the book of Proverbs, chapter 21, verse 1. It says, "The king's heart is in the hands of the Most High." The heart is referring to his mind. The king's mind is in the hands of the Most High. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So the Most High causes the king to do his bidding. Whatever the Most High wants that king to do, the Most High has that king do. Another scripture we're going to go to is one chapter before, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 24. "Man's goings are of the Lord. How can a man then understand his own way?" So those two scriptures are a little bit of an insight to have you understand why the Most High had these guys paint, or I should say build these cathedrals and have these black icons painted. The reason was because in Western Europe, our image, the image of the real Israelites, the real Jews, the real Christians, was being destroyed. But at the same time, blacks were still ruling in Eastern Europe. So the Most High had these icons survive even up to today. And that's why brothers are able to use these icons out on the street as part of our proof that we know that the real Jews, the real Christians are black. And also, let me add one last thing to this before we actually get into these books. The Russian icons predate Renaissance art. You can find the Russian icons from the 1000s, the 900s, the 1100s, which is all pre-Renaissance, that are dark. But you'll be hard-pressed to find a white or red, I should say, image of Yahushua, Jesus Christ, the angels, so forth and so on, that predates the Renaissance. That's the importance of these icons. Not that these icons are an actual depiction of Yahushua or the prophets. That's not what they are. But what they are is they're a reminder of what we already know that the scriptures already say. And they help our people break through that barrier of having that Renaissance Edomite white image out their heads, and they can see themselves as being the Israelites, which is very important, and then they can move on to the weightier matters of the scriptures. Now we're going to go to this book called The Rise of Russia. And this book is by Time Life Publications, which is a very, very prestigious publication. It's part of a larger series of books that include another very popular book called Imperial Rome. But we're going to stick with this particular book called The Rise of Russia, and we're going to go to page 128. And I want you to focus on the guy in the middle of your screen. We're going to read the caption that's underlined underneath the picture, and then we're going to examine the picture. It says, "A feeble-minded Tsar, Fedor, inherited the unrest stirred up by his father, Ivan the Terrible." Now take a good look at this picture. The first thing anybody with two eyes can see, or even one eye for that matter, is that the guy in the picture is dark-skinned. The second thing that you can see clearly is that the guy in the picture has woolly hair. This is a so-called Negro, a so-called black man, an Israelite, that was ruling Russia from the year 1584 to the year 1598. And during that time, many Russian icons were painted. Why do you think a lot of the icons that were painted during that time was dark-skinned? Why? Because dark-skinned people were ruling Russia. Just like I said, you have a lot of simple-minded Edomites, so-called white people, that are just as simple as our people, Israelites, so-called blacks and Hispanics. And they come on the comment boards and they tell us that we're out of our minds for saying that blacks rule Russia during the Dark Ages. Well, guess what? We don't just say that blacks rule Russia during the Dark Ages, but Time Life Publications, a prestigious publication amongst you so-called white people, says that black people rule Russia during the Dark Ages, and this picture is proof of that. Now we're going to turn to page 76 in this book called The Rise of Russia. Now the statue that you're looking at is a statue of the Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Now the broad nose and the full lips are a dead giveaway that Ivan the Terrible, just like his son, was a so-called Negro, a so-called black man, an Israelite. And he ruled from the year 1547 to the year 1584. He was the Tsar of Russia from 1547 to 1584. In the year 1552, this black Russian Tsar commissioned a cathedral to be built in commemoration of a victory that he had over a group called the Kazan Tartars. And after he defeated the Kazan Tartars in that battle, he commissioned a cathedral to be built. And what cathedral was that? It was the Cathedral of St. Basil. And in case you have a short memory, St. Basil, as I showed you earlier, was a so-called Negro, a so-called black man, an Israelite. And he had a cathedral built in his name by this black Tsar, Ivan the Terrible. And what do you find when you go inside the Cathedral of St. Basil? You find black icons. So you have a black Tsar that built a cathedral in commemoration of a black patron saint, and inside the cathedral is black icons depicting the people, the prophets of the Bible. This is all not a coincidence. Okay? Now, before I get off Ivan the Terrible, I want to say one last thing about him. He was not a nice guy. Okay? If you know anything about history, he killed his son. So he was not a nice guy. As a matter of fact, speaking of the Cathedral of St. Basil, some historians record that the guy that built the Cathedral of St. Basil, designed and built the cathedral, Ivan the Terrible had him killed after he was done. Why did he have the guy killed? Because he said the cathedral was so magnificent that he didn't want that guy to build anything greater. So what did he do? He had him put to death. All right, so he wasn't a nice guy, but he was an Israelite. And that's a dead giveaway as to why you find so many black icons that were painted even during his time. Now we're going to deal with this book called The Annunciation Cathedral of the Moscow Kremlin. The Annunciation Cathedral was a cathedral that was built during the reign of Ivan the Great, also known as Ivan III. He's the grandfather of the so-called black man, the Israelite man, Ivan the Terrible, and the great-grandfather of Ivan the Terrible's son, Fedor, who we also proved was a so-called black man. Now, when we look really quickly back at this book called The Rise of Russia, remember this picture I showed you of Fedor? The guy on his left is supposed to be Ivan the Great or Ivan III. But you can clearly see that that picture is totally out of place. It doesn't match in substance or in style to any of the images that I've been showing you earlier. It doesn't match in substance or style to the picture of Fedor, nor does it match in substance and definitely not in style to all the paintings of the Russian icons. That's something that Time Life Book threw in there to throw the reader off. Could you imagine if they put a dark image of Ivan the Great? Then people will start to say, wait a minute, were all these guys black? So it's up to the reader to be able to decipher the difference. That's not Ivan III. Ivan III was a so-called black man. He was an Israelite man. All right. Now, he had a cathedral built during his time called the Cathedral of the Annunciation. Now, we want to take a look inside the Cathedral of the Annunciation, and let's take a look inside and see what we see. Now, when you go and look at figure 154, that's the prophet Aaron, the brother of Moses. Clearly, a so-called black man, an Israelite man. All right. Now let's take a look at another image. This is figure number 209. And this is the prophet Daniel. Now, for those of you that don't remember, when you read the book of Daniel's chapter 10, verses 5 and 6, the book of Daniel describes Christ, Yahushua, as being dark-skinned. Now we find a Russian icon of the prophet Daniel himself being dark-skinned. By the way, when you read the book of Daniel, the first chapter, it tells you that Daniel was from the tribe of Judah, pursuant to Jeremiah 14 and 2 that says Judah is what? Black unto the ground. So this image is accurate. All right. Now let's take a look at figure number 157. That's Gideon. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at figure number 162. This is Joshua. Okay. Clearly a Jake. Clearly with an afro, dark skin, everything. All right. Moving on. We're going to look at figure number 153. That's King David. A Jake. Now we're going to move on and look at figure number 121. That's the Apostle Paul. Again, clearly a Jake. All right. Now, this is figure number 139. That's a depiction of the resurrection of Lazarus. And everybody in that image is dark-skinned. All right. Here's another one. King Solomon. Figure 156. Clearly a Jake, a so-called black man, an Israelite. And this one I've been showing you throughout the video. This is St. Basil, for whom a cathedral was built by Ivan the Terrible. Clearly a so-called black man. Here's another one. A picture of the Last Supper, figure number 140. Clearly the image of Jakes. So all this is showing you is that these black icons were being painted at the same time the Renaissance was going on in Western Europe. But the Most High allowed these images to survive even up to today to prove that the real Israelites were Jakes. And a lot of this art predates Renaissance art. That's the key. A lot of this art predates Renaissance art. You can go to the 900s during the reign of Vladimir the Great and find black icons. And Vladimir the Great was a black man. He was an Israelite. He was the father of Boris and Gleb, the princes that I showed you guys earlier in this video. They're his sons. You can see them on your screen right now. They're clearly Jakes. All right? So this is just a quick video that I put together to give brothers and sisters a little bit of the history of the Russian icons. Nothing too deep, nothing too major. Just a little bit of the history so you guys can have a clear idea of why the Russian icons are dark. It's not by happenstance or coincidence. And also why we use them. Basically just to edify our people. There's nothing really deep about this stuff. There's much more weightier matters in the scriptures that need to be dealt with. But these things can be used to edify our people. And once our people see themselves in the scriptures, which is something I've been preaching for a long time. Once our people see themselves in the scriptures, they will be able to move on to the weightier matters of the scriptures. So with that, for those of y'all that are watching this on YouTube, I'm going to cut this short and I'm going to add a little bit more to the same video on our website. So if you want to see a little bit more, I'm going to show you guys Vladimir, Boris and Gleb and other things in a further edition of this video, a longer edition of this video on our website. Because as you guys already know, there's an attack on all Israelite videos throughout YouTube. People are hating. Whoever it is, they're hating. So it doesn't make sense loading long videos that are only going to get taken down anyway. All right, so with that, I say peace and safety to the nation of Israel. You guys know where to find us, Yasha Allah Library. And if the video gets taken down, www.therealjewsarblack.com, where the rest of this video will be posted. Shalom. The Renaissance era was not the first time that the so-called white man sought to destroy the image of the Israelites, which are the so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It's not the first time. Actually, that's recorded in the scriptures. They tried that once before. The Renaissance is the greatest scale that they ever attempted to destroy our image, but it's not the first time. So we're gonna get two other quick scriptures, and then we're gonna get back into this quick history lesson. All right. The first scripture we're gonna get is the book of 1 Maccabees, the 3rd chapter, and we're gonna read the 48th verse. It says, "And laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images." So even back then, during the time of the Greeks, the so-called white man was seeking to put his image amongst our holy books, put his image on the face of the Israelites and say that he is them. All the way back then, and have our people bow down and worship him as God, the same way they bow down and worship Caesar Borgias today. So this is not the first time that that's happened. All right. Another good scripture to use to further illustrate this point, it's a very popular scripture in Israel, and that scripture is Job chapter 9, verse 24. And it reads, "The earth is given into the hands of the wicked," which is the so-called white man. He's controlling the earth. The mineral resources, the commodities, the finances, the military, so forth and so on. He's controlling the earth. So the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Who gave the earth into the hands of the wicked? The Most High. Reading on, "He covereth the faces of the judges thereof." Who are the judges of this earth? The Israelites. The Most High set the Israelites up to be the judges of this earth. How does the so-called white man cover our faces up? By putting his face up and saying that he's the Most High, that he's Yahushua, Jesus Christ, that he's the apostles, that he's the Israelites. Reading on, "If not, where and who is he?" So if the so-called white man is not the wicked after everything he's done since he's been ruling this earth, then who's the wicked then? That's what the Job is asking. All right. Now, Let's take a quick look back at this picture that we've been looking at throughout this video of Fedor, the son of Ivan the Terrible. Now I want you to take a really good look at Fedor. Particularly, I want you to look at what he's wearing. Because I'm going to show you guys something that I find to be very funny, and to show you how the so-called white man covers the faces of the judges thereof. Not just the prophets of the Bible, but even the black rulers that ruled in Europe, the so-called white man tries to cover that up too. But he can't get away with it, man. I'm going to show you something. Check this out. So let's take a look at what Fedor is wearing. Let's take a look at his shirt. Do you see how the neckline of his shirt extends all the way to where it meets his chin in this picture in this book called The Rise of Russia, right? You can clearly see that. The shirt line extends all the way to meet his chin in this picture. Now I'm going to show you another picture of Fedor. Check this out. Here's another picture of Fedor that the so-called white man has throughout Russia. Now in this picture, it's the same exact picture as the one we saw in The Rise of Russia. I'm going to show you them side by side. Except this time the so-called white man tried to lighten this picture up a little bit. And now the neckline of the shirt no longer meets his chin because they lighten that up to make it look like that's his neck. But that's not the original picture. The original picture, the shirt line went all the way to his neck. And if you look carefully, even his hair is not as woolly as it is in the original picture. They tried to lighten it up a little bit, but not too much. But I guess some Edomites somewhere got mad, really mad, and said, to hell with that. I'm going to really lighten this thing up. So I'm going to show you a third picture of Fedor. Check this out. This is also Fedor. All of these are the same picture, except this time now, this guy doesn't even have woolly hair anymore. The guy on your right. Now he has straight hair. Does everybody see that? You see how evil a so-called white man is? You see how he tried to destroy our image throughout history? This has gone on in Russia. When blacks started falling in Russia, a lot of times you had these so-called white people that would come in and they would actually start whitewashing some of these pictures later on in history. All right. Here's a picture from a book called The Russian Icons by Father Vladimir Ivanov. And in this picture, you can see that the images in the background are dark, but the so-called white man that's actually painting a picture is painting a picture of a so-called white saint, patron saint. Check that out. The guy that he's painting is red. It's an Edomite. The guys behind him in the pictures are dark. The so-called white man is definitely the wicked. If he's not the wicked, then like the scriptures say, we don't know who is. We don't know who is. All right. Now here's a couple of other pictures I wanted to show you guys real quick before I close down. In this image right here, you have Saint Nicholas, the guy who they based the story of Santa Claus on. Saint Nicholas, he's the guy in the center. And you can clearly see that he's a dark-skinned man. And on either side of Saint Nicholas is Boris and Gleb, Princes Boris and Gleb, the same guys that I've been showing you throughout this picture, throughout this video, I mean. These are the sons of Vladimir the Great. Everybody in this picture, Saint Nicholas and Vladimir's two sons, are dark. I hope everybody sees that. All right. Here's another picture of Boris and Gleb riding on horses in Russia. What do they look like? They're dark skinned. All these dark images throughout Russia, and you mean to tell me that all the Russian rulers were white? They were Edomites? I don't think so. All right. Now, let's take a look at this picture right here. This is a picture of Boris and Gleb with their father, Vladimir the Great. All right. He ruled around the late 900s in Russia. He was the leader of Russia in the late 900s. And everybody in this picture is dark. Vladimir has a crown on his head. And to show you that these images are actually dark, okay, if you look like right around the edges of the face, the edges of the neck, the edges of the hands, you can see like little streaks, like white streaks on these pictures. You can contrast those edges with the rest of the picture, the rest of their faces, and you can see that these images are dark. But again, as I said, as the so-called white man started taking over, little by little, he started trying to whitewash even these images. And the images that he couldn't whitewash, he just destroyed them completely, man. All right. Here's another image of Vladimir with Boris and Gleb. And this is the different picture that was painted Just to show you that the first artist didn't make a mistake. This is a completely different picture. They're wearing completely different clothes than the first picture. And again, you can see that Vladimir, Boris, and Gleb are dark. All right? So this is another ruler that ruled Russia during the late 900s. Okay? And when he fell, he had another son called Yaroslav the Wise. After Vladimir died, his son Yaroslav the Wise became ruler of Russia after him, all the way down to Ivan III, all the way down to Vasily III, all the way down to Ivan the Terrible, all the way down to Fedor. These were all so-called black people. Okay? Now, if you go to England, which we're going to go to later, I'm going to show you that the so-called white man had two ways of destroying art. Either he would destroy the art by trying to whitewash it, or in other cases, he would see black statues and chip the nose off. There's a lot of statues of black kings of England you're going to see that are missing noses. I'm going to show you that in a completely different book down the road. I just wanted to mention that to you, okay? So with that, I hope this video edified the listener and the watcher. Again, as I said in the unextended version, the regular version, these videos are not meant to break new ground or to, it's nothing really deep about these videos. All it is I'm trying to show you is that we knew that the real Jews were black. We always knew that. The real Jews were dark-skinned people. All right, we always knew that. And these icons and these images have been preserved by the Most High, allowing certain men to have these things preserved, painted, and then preserved, so that way in these late days and times, we can be reminded that we're the people of the Bible, and then we can move on to understanding the Bible itself, the more important things. All right? So I hope you brothers and sisters were edified. You'll also find, let me say this too, you'll also find when you go into St. Basil's Cathedral and the Cathedral of Annunciation and so forth and so on in Russia, you will find Renaissance art in there, of course. Because as I showed you with this picture, you have Edomites that were painting white images, and they're putting these images in these churches. But the key to this whole thing, brothers and sisters, is the older images. As the images are older and older and older, the older images are dark. The more recent images are pale. Keep that in mind. With that, I say peace and safety to the nation of Israel, as I said, and we'll be back the next edition of Lines of Israel Library. I will be doing more on Russia maybe in the future, and just dealing with a whole bunch of other books, if it be the Most High's will. All right, brothers and sisters, shalom.